We're going to continue looking at the reasons for the founding of various colonies, specifically in the New England area. Henry VIII, who began the Anglican Church in England, was basically upset with the Catholic Church because they would not grant him another annulment. With that refusal to give him an annulment, he is going to create his own church called the Anglican Church, which was very similar to the Catholic Church, with, of course, the exception that they would allow him to get an annulment, with other very few changes from the actual Catholic doctrine. However, even though he created this and there were very few differences from the Catholic Church, there were other reformers who wanted to completely rid the church of all Roman Catholic rituals and traditions. They were going to be called Puritans. Basically, they want to purify the Church of England from all Catholic doctrine. They also believed in individual and congregational control of the religion rather than there being one hierarchy of or group that controlled the religion. So it's going to be much more local control of each specific church. The Pilgrims were one of these groups. They had initially fled to the Netherlands seeking to practice their religion the way they wanted, but they felt their children were not being raised to be Englishmen. So they are going to once again set sail and head further west to the New World. They were called separatists because, again, they want to practice their own religion. And they finally land in Plymouth, Massachusetts in 1620. Before they even get off the boat, which is what you see here in this top picture, they're going to sign what is called the Mayflower Compact. The Mayflower Compact is going to be the document that sets up a direct democracy for the colony. This is going to be different from the House of Burgesses because this direct democracy means that each and every citizen will have a vote in their government. That's going to be very important and also sets an important precedent for the future and the founding of the United States. Not only did the Mayflower Compact set up a direct democracy, it's also going to set a group of rules for the people in Plymouth to follow. The colony definitely struggles and has a starving time similar to other colonies, but eventually the Native Americans of the area come in and help teach them how to grow those crops. And this is where we get the story of our Thanksgiving, which is what you see depicted here in this bottom photo or painting. It's that traditional story of Squanto and the other Native Americans who they all come together, the Native Americans and Pilgrims alike, to share that feast. William Bradford, who was one of the Pilgrim leaders, is going to write a very famous piece of work, a piece of literature called Of Plymouth Plantation, which discusses the various foundations of that colonial society. The Massachusetts Bay Company is going to be another Puritan colony. Again, the Puritans, under the leadership of John Winthrop, believed that they were a city upon a hill, meaning that they were supposed to be an example for all other Puritans and even Christians to follow, that they should set up an ideal society and be an example to the world of how they should behave and what their lives should look like. In this particular society, there was a very direct connection between the church and state. In fact, in order to even participate in the government, you had to be a church member. And the government also followed along with the Puritan rules and regulations. So this is the government and their religion are going to be very closely tied to one another. Not everyone agreed with all of this, specifically Roger Williams. Roger Williams believed in the separation of church and state. He is going to be an early champion of religious freedom. However, it's not for what you might think. It wasn't for the sake of the church, for the sake of the government, excuse me. He believed that the separation of church and state should happen not to protect the government or the state, but to protect the church and to keep the church from becoming corrupt. For these beliefs, he will be exiled by the Puritan leadership, meaning he had to leave Massachusetts Bay. He eventually leaves and founds Providence, Rhode Island, where he is going to successfully acquire and peacefully acquire land from the Native Americans to begin his colony. Anne Hutchinson is another such dissenter. However, her dissent came in a different nature. She believed in individual worship, and she began questioning the Puritan leaders and the type of faith that they were teaching their followers. Her belief was in antinomianism, which means that basically the only law she had to follow was God's law. She didn't believe that she should have to listen to the Puritan government, but that it should come directly from God. They put her on trial, like you see here, and she is eventually banished from Massachusetts Bay and also flees to Rhode Island. We'll look more closely at that particular trial and what happened a little later. The Indians do not simply allow the Europeans to continue to take their land without resistance. While they did cooperate at first, eventually they realized that the colonists are going to continue trying to take their land. So the fact that their populations have been decimated by disease, the fact that the colonists wanted to continue taking their land and force their religion upon them is going to cause disputes, like the Pequot War in 1637, where there was a complete massacre of the Native Americans, followed by King Philip's War, where there were a lot of deaths on both sides, and this does lead to the death of King Philip himself. But eventually the colonists do win, and eventually, once again, that Indian resistance will fade because they, quite frankly, don't have much left to fight with. We do see other countries involved in settling this area. Henry Hudson is going to sail for the Dutch, even though he was an Englishman. He is going to explore the Hudson River and the Hudson Bay areas, which are now what we know as New York. But at the time, he is going to claim them for the Dutch. So it's going to be called New Amsterdam. This particular colony had a tremendous number of various immigrants from lots of different places. And they were also a champion of religious freedom. So they were not like the Puritans in requiring that everyone be of that particular faith. And they also didn't require that the government and religion be very closely tied. The English were successful in taking that colony in 1664 and renamed it New York. And that's how it became an English colony. And eventually they take part of New York and they're going to divide it in to create New Jersey. So that is where those New England colonies are all going to come from.